Okay, it looks like it's just after 1 o'clock. My name is Cassie Paulsgrove, and I lead our Career Connections team at the Ohio Department of Education. And we are thrilled to be partnering with Amy Harker at the ESC of Northeast Ohio to host these career readiness leader meetings every month. So hopefully you've had a chance to join us in the past. If this is your first time, we hope that you can join us again in the future. But this presentation is going to be led today by Amy. So I'm excited to introduce her and allow her to kind of take over the screen and share with you some unique tools. She's going to be talking a little bit about this, but this session builds on our Career Readiness Leaders Network meeting from last month when we had special guest Eric Schinniger join us. If you are interested in viewing that, again, we have posted that meeting link for posterity's sake on our Department of Education website. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Amy. Just as a reminder, we are recording this session. And yes, we'd love to have your video on to be able to interact. And we're looking forward to an exciting session today. Thanks, Amy. It's all yours.
I'm so excited to be here. Of course, I loved Eric's presentation last month, and he has such a wealth of knowledge and just information that he gave to us. So we thought we would unpack it today. And we're going to unpack it with an engagement strategy, which is using a whiteboard. Now, whiteboards come in a variety of different platforms. We have the Zoom boards. You have very intricate whiteboards. They're called Infinity whiteboards, which is a software such as Miro, which is free to educators as well. But we're using Jamboard because Jamboard, a lot of schools have access to Google, and this is part of the Google Suite, so it's free if you have the Google Suites. So we thought it would be an easy tool to introduce to you to show how the tool itself can be used for interaction rather than just writing on it. Some of the other ways it can be used together, not only for teachers to teach students, but also for if you're a leader or administrator and you want to use it in a staff meeting, or if you teach a class or you're doing a professional development and you're a facilitator. This is a tool that is super easy, and you can integrate it with a lot of different thinking strategies, which we'll talk about. So going back to Eric's presentation, actually, I want to start with introducing Jamboard first. So let's go ahead and look at the Jamboard pieces. And you can see, and I'm going to pull off the tool at the bottom, which is my laser pointer. And you can see that the laser pointer itself will help highlight different things when you are making a presentation. So over on the left-hand side, you see a row of tools. Starting at the top going down, it's your pen, and you can select different widths of the pen and different colors of the pen. Of course, you have an eraser. Then we have sticky notes, and we're going to use those a lot today because that allows for engagement without actually having to use a voice. And students and often adults, I've been doing a lot of professional developments in the last few months about remote learning, and engaging adults is, I think, sometimes harder than engaging students. So it's a nice way that people who don't want to turn on their microphone and want to stay muted can engage in the discussion. Right under the sticky note, when you're going to use the sticky note, all it is it bounces up, you type into it, and then you save it. And you can choose your color of your sticky note as well. And so then underneath the sticky note is a way to add images. So if you have something that you've already designed that you want to load onto your whiteboard, you can do that here. And then right below that is the shape box. So it allows you to enter different shapes. And then of course, there's a way to fill the bucket just like you have in other platforms where you can fill those shapes with color. And then we have the different widths of the pen that's up here as well. Then you can add text. And of course, at the end, I already introduced the laser pointer. So very simple tools. One of the things after I started using Jamboard, I was just excited with the tools when I first started. And then all of a sudden, I knew that I could move through my presentation like this. So if I want to advance the presentation, I can see all the different whiteboards. And you can see right here, I have 20 whiteboards that I've set up. But underneath that is a tiny little arrow that I just discovered where you can do a lot more manipulation. You can add in. You can move these boards from one place to another just by dragging them. And it allows you to see your whole presentation, and you can click on one, and then of course it comes up at the bottom. So a nice way to get through, add new boxes. Initially when I got on, it comes with 8 as a standard, and I thought 8 was it. And so I was using it with 8 for a long time, and then I realized I could up it to 20. So it's very easy to use. And so with that,
Amy, you have one quick question. How
yes.
can I add Jamboard to my Google account?
I will tell you that at first I didn't think I had it. And if you have Google Suite, where that means that you have the Google Classroom and all you have to do is contact your administrator, system administrator, because ours was not turned on. My system administrator didn't think anybody wanted to use it, so he just kept it turned off. And so I had him turn it on, and now a lot of people are using it. So you'll have to talk to your system administrator for that, but you should have it, and you have it for free if you have the Google Suite. The next thing that you need to know about is these 3 little dots up next to the share button, and those allow you to rename it, allows you to download it as a PDF. You can save your frame as an image, or you can remove the whole thing. And then of course, if you want to do several copies of your whole presentation, then you can make a copy here and you don't have to reinvent from scratch. And it allows you to do updates, and then if you have a problem, you can send some feedback to Google. But good ways to know how to save your presentation. So I'm going to go back now and start the presentation. So if I were going into this, I would make sure that my students or my staff members know how to use Jamboard so that they can interact with me as I go through the presentation. Going back to Eric's presentation from last month, his was on these 6 different remote learning strategies and what we need to pay attention to when we're in that particular planning stages. So we want to make sure when we are connecting remotely that we make what we're doing relevant. And so we try to connect and make that why of learning really standing out so that students know, why are we learning this? Or teachers know, why are we doing this? Why are you making us go through this? Today, I'm doing this because I want you to know that Jamboard is a way that we can use as an engagement strategy for any kind of presentation. So the why is very important. The second thing that Eric talked about was discourse, and it's talking about leveraging tech to foster conversation. One of the things that I've noticed in some classrooms is that they're and talking with parents that the classroom is jumping from Padlet to Flipgrid to Jamboard to another thing, and so the students are so busy trying to get to the tech and understand the tech that they're not getting the content that you want to have taught. So when we're thinking about discourse, selecting the right tool first of all, and not to select too many that it gets overwhelming for people. And so today we're going to present 2 to you. Jamboard will be one, and we're going to also talk a little bit later about Padlet. Collaboration, I spent a lot of time this summer working with Agile for Education, and collaboration was a big tool that we talked about. And of course, when we talk about collaboration, I put this big Post-it note right here, and I'm going to get rid of that so that I can click on it. Once you have a Post-it note down, you can change the size of it to emphasize. So this says, collaboration is just not working in a group. So we don't want to put people in a group and call it collaboration if there's no engagement happening between them. So important key information. So if I want to get rid of that information now, all I have to do is delete it. So in your collaboration, when you think about setting that up with your students or with your staff, first of all, make sure, like we said, we have the purpose of why they're going to work together. What is it that they need at the end to have some clarity, and for the accountability part, so the what, So we have the why, the what, and then of course, we want to get everybody to that independent stage. So how are you going to plan to bring on the autonomy so that they can do things on their own without feeling overwhelmed and understand how to use the tech tool, but also learning the content as they're using the tech tool. One of the things, as I mentioned this summer with Agile Education, we talked about that, and this was developed by John Miller, so I want to give him credit for it. I just adapted it a little for today's conversation. When you're interacting with Jamboard, you can go over and have them peel off a Post-it note and utilize it that way, or you can pre-set up some Post-it notes going down the side. And I know Bob Ross might be interested in this for his class. You can have people select things so that we have this continuum of collaboration that goes from 1 to 5 in stages, and it starts with individual, which is basically students working on their own, to supportive, where all these things are effective, where you have student work. Gosh, I can hardly see it today. In fact, I'm going to stick on my glasses so I can see this a little bit more clearly. Students work all alone. Support and feedback are given from peers, and a pair share would be an example of a supportive collaboration. Then you go to larger groups where it's more cooperative, then increasing to more collaborative, and ultimately we want to make it a communicative type of situation where we collaborate together. And it doesn't mean that individual work is bad. It just means that what are our students ready for? We want them to be able to work on all 5 levels, and we want our staff to be able to work on all 5 levels, but it doesn't mean that that's the only way to work. We want to make sure that we can do all 5, but most of the time people work in 1, 2, or 3. So getting it truly collaborative, moving it up to step 4, this would be, for example, if you're using project-based learning and you're having students work on a project together and they're communicating, they're learning with each other and where they are in their task. And a couple key pieces differences that the whole team is assessed together for the outcomes, where communicative, the whole group is, you can also grade independently. So, because you know which each person is doing tasks. So collaborative, they're working on individual tasks moving forward, and communicative, they're able to cross-pollinate, for lack of a better word, to support other teams. So if there's a project-based learning going on that's collaborative, to make it communicative, they would be interacting with each other and supporting each other and making it even a larger network of collaboration. So what I would like for you to do, this is where you get to be engaged, and you're going to try and just, if I were doing this with staff or students, I could have, like I set up this one Post-it note with my initials on it. I could put, this is where I currently think that I have students working or adults working in the community. And today I would say we're probably doing more cooperative group work. So I can track who it is if I have their initials on the Post-it notes, or you can put numbers, and numbers will allow you to anonymously allow students to participate by just giving them the number. So if you would like to pick up an X now, a Post-it note, and put it where you think that your staff or your students are currently working. Where do you feel that you do the most work right now? And thank you for engaging. This is exciting. I like the way MLF changed hers so she can identify, or he can identify where the Post-it note is. And no worries if the Post-it note turns and you want to turn it back the other way, you just grab the corner of it and you can set it back sideways, or if you want it to be turned, so if you're falling in between those two, that works as well. And if in the Jamboard, what I did is I loaded the image from something I already created, And then I just pulled off a Post-it note at a time and put an X on it and kept duplicating it until I had a row of Post-it notes over here so that everyone could just grab and go. And it doesn't take a lot of time that way. Okay, well, thank you for this feedback. So now I'm seeing where you all are working at this point in time. So if I were working specifically on collaboration, I would design something to help increase and to get more work up in the collaborative and the communicative areas. So thank you for doing that with me. We're going to go ahead and move forward into flexibility. I wanted to talk a little bit about the fact that sometimes we still want to do things that the way that we've always done them, and then we just want to get on a Zoom call and do them the exact same way. But when we are going into the remote world, it allows us to do things a little differently, and we can kind of take a risk and try something new. And so flexibility, we want to make sure that we know that our schedules can be a little different. We don't have to be into the framework we've always been. We can change the way students attend to the lesson. Are they attending synchronously, synchronously, and so forth. And then how they complete the work can be different. It doesn't have to be like we do in a class where we hand everything out and collect it all at the same time. It could be done, we can think about the how, the when, and what ways it can be done in a remote way differently than what we can do in regular. So a couple other things about flexibility. We don't always have to use tech for that either. And so when we're thinking about being flexible, Eric had mentioned these non-tech ways of doing that, and that's modeling through written explanation, scaffolding, guided and independent practice, authentic challenge problems, independent reading, playlists and choice boards, movement activities, and reflective writing journals. And some of those can be done on tech, and some of them can be done asynchronously on their own without using the tech products. Is important. Personalization, this is a key area, and I've been working in personalized learning now for the last, maybe 15 years or so. And Eric came up with this transforming teaching from high agency teaching to low agency, and talking about the difference between more personalized learning versus the traditional approach. And in the high agency, it's about facilitating learning rather than just delivering instruction. Of course, moving to student-centered versus teacher-centered. Learning anytime, anywhere. We talked about the flexibility in the schedules, or just classroom learning. We want it to be personalized and differentiated versus a standardized approach. We do things to learn, and then low agency is learning to do. And then, of course, not that any of this is bad, and I always want to make sure that sometimes you have to do those kinds of things, but we always want to try to move toward that high agency. We want to develop thinking rather than looking just for a right answer, integrating curriculum versus teaching segmented curriculum, and active learning opportunities versus passive consumption. I love these graphics that he created where you talk about when you personalize, it's pace, place, path, voice, and choice. When you go and are using all those in a different way, that brings in that high agency personalized learning. And then this particular graphic on the left-hand side is talking about the learning environment kind of being on the outside, and how the choice, the voice, and again, the pace, place, all center on the personalized learning. So two different ways of looking at how that all can come together. One of the things that I've been highly involved in is Future Ready, and if you're not involved in that yet, Ohio Department of Education had become a Future Ready state, and I think it's been about 5 years now, Cassie, is that right? Where it's Future Ready. And so the Future Ready framework itself, I wanted to kind of highlight this futureready.org. They've added a new piece, which is for remote learning. And if you haven't checked it out yet, go there and check it out. The whole framework is about personalized learning, and it has all all these gears, and each gear is about collaborative leadership, curriculum and instruction, personalized professional development, your infrastructure, your budget, your community partnerships, data and privacy, and use of space and time. So these are all categories in which you can personalize learning, and the Future Ready framework has set up a way that any school who wants to become part of this, all free by the way, is you sign on, your superintendent sign on like a pledge that you're going to be a Future Ready school, and then you get to take this assessment, and through that assessment it tells you where your school is strong and where it's weak, and where you should start in order to begin your path to personalization. It's tons of free resources there, tons of good strategies, and if you don't follow Thomas Murray on Twitter and look at the different things that the professional developments that have been offered for free through there, they're outstanding. And then feedback. This is one area that I really emphasize when I'm doing a walkthrough or an observation or an evaluation, when I'm watching my staff give feedback. We always talk a little bit more in depth about this because I know that a lot of my staff members do very positive feedback. Good job, great job. Think about that a little differently, but we have to talk about how we can be more timely with it, more meaningful, and more specific. So if a student's doing a good job and you say, oh, great, good job, what are they actually doing a good job in? Be specific about it. I love the way that you punctuated that sentence. I love the way that you explained that with so much rich detail. So very specific will help the student be able to move forward. Now, this thing that you can do with Jamboard is that you can create a formative assessment, which is another form of feedback. So in the middle of a presentation or at the end of a presentation, if you want to find out where students are, you can have them create a Post-it note and put it onto an image that allows you to give a feeling for where they are. So this time I'm going to allow you to engage by, rather than having all the Post-it notes ready to go for you, I'm going to go and have you get your own Post-it note, type something into it, and then save it. And if you would put your initials in it or put a comment, then what I would like for you to do is then tell me, where are you right now in this presentation? Do you feel bored because you're so familiar with Jamboard and all the things we're talking about in engagement strategies? Are you in the flow right now feeling like, gosh, I could really think about how I could use this with my staff or my students? Or do you feel like, oh gosh, there's a lot going on here and I'm not getting it and I don't feel comfortable and I'm feeling a little bit anxious right now? And if you don't want to have a really big Post-it note, you can drag it and make it small as well. Thank you for the comments. For those of you who are trying to digest it all and trying to figure out exactly how to work this, after we get done with the presentation today, if you have any additional questions or how to use Jamboard or ways to use it differently, feel free to email me. I'm happy to provide some information to you outside of the presentation as well. All right, it looks like most of you are right in the center, a little bit of anxiety about what's happening here, and I'll monitor that and see if I can help. AJP, if you feel like you want to change their mind, they're not anxious anymore. But so if somebody was in the anxiety level, I would want to try to figure out how I could help them feel more comfortable. Another way that Eric talked about was doing things are not just tech, right? We can use tech to do things that help engagement. So using Jamboard, we can create a scenario like I've done here. I created a department store scenario. Monica is the HR supervisor. Jose is, you're going to pretend like you are in this scenario. So it would be your shift supervisor. And of course you, and in this scenario, you are a floor employee. So I'm going to go ahead. If I were with students, I might have them read this out loud. The other thing I could have done was contact a few students ahead of time and ask them to act this out. And so you're running late to work and you arrive frustrated with yourself for oversleeping due to a family crisis. You begin work quickly, doing the stalking that you were assigned the day before. You are busy working when your supervisor comes up to you and asks you what you're doing. You explain you are doing the task they assigned you yesterday. Your supervisor, Jose, said that there was a change in what items were to go in that area and asked you to remove the items and restock the items that were supposed to go there. Jose also says that you are going to get docked pay for the time that you missed since it's the third time you were late. You get upset, tell Jose you don't think it's fair, and you walk away upset. You go to talk and speak with Monica, the HR supervisor, who asks you what you are there for, and you explain. But the whole time, she is typing on her computer and looking at her phone or her watch. She agrees with Jose and sends you back to complete your assigned task, which leaves you frustrated. You do not feel like she listened to you. So this scenario would allow in the career readiness environment to talk about a lot of different things. And if you go to the Jamboard, this is one way that you could set it up. I would have one board with a question in the center, which is what Monica could have done. The second one is what Jose could do to make the situation better. And then the third one is what could you do to improve the situation. Now know that as a user and as a participant, you can move from Jamboard to Jamboard using your controls where you're logged in, and you won't change the view that I have. So if you want to look at another page in the presentation, you can move forward, so another board. So what I'm going to ask you to do is think about that scenario, and you either can answer for Monica or Jose or yourself of something that they could have done to improve the situation. So you're going to pull a Post-it note off. You're going to think of a way that Monica, Jose, or you could improve the situation and put it on the correct Jamboard. So wherever you add the note, you have to be already on that board. So if you're going to talk about Monica, be on Monica's board. If you're going to talk about Jose, be on Jose's board. If you're going to say something you could have done differently, go to the U one, which is this one. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a few minutes to think that through. Everybody tear off a sticky note and put it on at least one of the boards. And then we're going to talk about what you could do with this as far as a career readiness activity for students. This could also be done with staff. If you have something you want your staff to work on and you wanted to feedback without having to have them talk, this is a nice way to get a lot of feedback. And you know that people are engaged because you can see the Post-it notes going up. And then what you would do after the fact, after you see the Post-it notes moving, and I don't have a whole lot of Post-it notes up here, so I'm going to give a few more minutes for everybody to think about how Monica could improve the situation, or Jose or yourself. Name one thing and put your Post-it note up. It looks like if you've typed on it, they were piling up on top of each other. So we just have to make sure that not more than one is piled on top. All right, so it looks like a lot of people have added to Monica and one person to Jose, and no one quite for the U yet, but we'll get to that one. Oh, good. There's some more there. Great, great. All right, so if I were doing this with students now, I could ask them, there's a great book called Making Thinking Visible. And what we're doing right now is called a chalk talk. And if I were doing this in a face-to-face classroom, I would have large chart paper or butcher paper hanging on the walls, and I would have the question in the middle. And I would either give the students Post-it notes to do this with, or I could even give them just markers and they could go up and write on the chalk paper. And that's what we've done in the past. So this is a new way of doing it in a remote learning environment where you can use your whiteboard and have them engage. Again, not a lot of talking had to happen, but a lot of people thinking, right? So I can see your thinking being visible because these great explanations are happening here. And so say that I wanted then to go back through a chalk talk, you have everybody put down their answers, and then you give time for everybody to read everyone else's answers, and then they can go back through and say, I like this answer, I don't like this answer. So now I'm going to give you an opportunity to use the annotation tool, and that's your pen. So say that I grab my pen and I look at this particular comment. When a colleague comes to your office, you need to make sure that you are attending to their needs and explaining why they need to finish something else first. So I would say I could have 3 different marks. I like this comment, I agree with this comment, could be a check mark, or I disagree. I could put an X next to somebody if I disagreed. Not that I disagreed with that, I was just giving you an example. So you can Control Z something if you want to get rid of it, or you can use the eraser. But if you would grab a pen, read, let's go, everybody be on Monica's page for now. Read Monica's comments, and everybody get an opportunity to either put a star that you really like that comment, a check mark that you think it's you agree with it, or an X if you think I don't agree with that one. Okay, now notice the engagement that we have here. We can see people thinking, we can see that they're reading, we can see that there's agreement, and so forth. So you get the idea. Now, if there was something a little bit more controversial, you might have a little bit more people disagreeing, but in this way we have people agreeing or saying it's a great idea. So with that, you could go back through now. It's called a gallery walk, and then you could talk about each thing, noticing that, oh gosh, got some really good comments going down here where you could have listened and practiced the 4 P's of listening, pausing, paraphrasing, and so forth. So that would allow us to have a gallery walk. We could talk about the things that are highly important, things that are being engaging, and so forth. As we go through, we see if there are other comments on the other page, we could do the same thing and annotate. In essence of time, we're not going to do that. I just wanted to give you an idea today of how that could be, how it could work. I do want to stop here for a minute and look at how you could improve the situation. So have a great conversation as we do a gallery walk about the you part. You're giving specific things that, suggestions that could be done on this particular situation. When we go over then to the next page, I could pull in the Ohio Means Readiness job seal. And what I've done here, this is the reliability rubric. If you're not familiar with the Ohio Means Jobs Readiness seal, it's on the Ohio Department of Education website. I can get you a link to it if you don't know where it is. But there is a rubric that is there, and that rubric has 4, going all the way from exemplar, which is on the left-hand side, down to, I forget the rating, but it decreases. So requiring direction and so forth is where they need improvement, going up to adding more to it here, or managing commitments. So what you could have students do then, oops, I'm highlighting. What you could have students do then is anytime that you get a tool that you don't want in Jamboard, if you go back and grab the arrow that gets rid of everything and you don't have to worry about it, you could have students then judge where they particularly are in their own world. Perhaps they're out doing a work-based learning experience and you want to tell them, or you want to see where they think that they fall right now. So, allowing them to put a Post-it note on. If you want it to remain anonymous, again, you could use numbers so that the student doesn't have to identify where they are. But this gives you an opportunity then to talk about reliability and teach it intentionally, because we know how important it is that those things on the rubric are being taught intentionally. And if we're not doing that, students will never make that metacognitive understanding of what those skills mean and how that they can improve on them. And so taking that question about what could you have done to improve the situation a little further, delving in and having them use the rubric to talk about that. All right, so we could have added other questions to that particular scenario. What skills does each person need? Oh, I wanted to talk a little bit about Monica too. When we were talking about Monica, even though when we got to the you part, if I was the you, that particular student, if they went into an office without an appointment, without setting up something ahead of time, and they just kind of barged into somebody's office, we can talk about how the perspectives change. So me looking on that, I had a problem. I wanted to go right in and address it, where Monica might have been in the middle of a Zoom call and she just didn't have time, or she had a meeting that was coming up and you were interrupting. Or it could have been the other way around, that her door was open, she welcomed you in, but she wasn't a good listener. So you can look at different perspectives too in that particular scenario. And then other questions could be, what workplace etiquette items have not been followed? How does it relate to the work you've been doing with the Ohio Means Readiness Seal? And then you could use the rubric for each of them. So where would you put Monica on that rubric? Where would you put Jose? And then they can reflect a little differently based on the situation. So what I'm going to have you do now is, if there are any questions, and Cassie, I'm going to ask for you to monitor the chat box for me and see if there are any questions right now. So if there's any questions that you have on how you can use Jamboard in an effective career education atmosphere, or in some of your cases, if you're the leader, how you can use this to facilitate a discussion with the staff. So I'm going to have you complete something, and then I'm going to give you about 5 minutes. And then once the 5 minutes are over, Cassie and her team are going to present another option that you can use for engagement strategies. So what I'm presenting to you in the next 3 boards is a like, lacking, learn, or looking forward to. I would like for you to take 5 minutes and pull off one of the Post-it notes, and then just click on it and add into the Post-it note what you would like to tell me about the presentation today and what is helpful to you. I've got to do one quick thing before you start. And if you notice on this, yes, Cassie.
You do have one question. What are some strategies to make the participants or students not anonymous? So this might be a perfect activity to talk about that.
If you don't want it to be anonymous, you can have them put their name before they respond. So if I'm going to have number 2, for example, and I could put, Amy Harker, and then my comment. And so whatever my comment is, I would save it, and then I would have that saved for me as a teacher or as a leader, going back and being able to address something that a person needs. That makes sense? Does that help with the answer to that question? All right, so this will give you an opportunity to ask some questions too, so that I can contact you if you have something that you want to talk about after. But in the next 5 minutes, if you would go to the these boards and put something you liked about the conversation. And so what I would like for you to do, click on it, open it up, and then type your thing in there. So what did I like about it? I liked your glasses. And then you just save it. And then once you have it saved, then and once you have it saved, then you can move to the next board and tell me something that that lacked in this particular situation. And some of the questions that can trigger your thought are, how could this presentation been improved? What more information did you need? What didn't feel right to you? And what did you think was missing from this conversation? And then the third thing is, what did you learn from it? And what you're looking forward to. And how I created these in Jamboard was just use my shapes. I used the square shape and drug it out. And then I just pulled my Post-it notes off and I put a 1 in it and then duplicated to 2 to 3, 4, and 5 and so forth until I had enough where I thought I was going to have about 30 in the presentation today. So I will stop talking and see if there are other questions in the chat box, and then you keep going with your Post-it activity for this. Hardest part is remaining quiet for me.
Amy, you have a question. I typed and saved my response, but now I don't see it anywhere. You might want to talk about how some shapes have to be sent backward and things like that.
Oh, thank you. In some of my designs, you can see these 3 little dots over here where you can duplicate something, delete something, or order something. If you put it on there and you don't see it, it means the order was out. So I would send that to the shape to the back so that the Post-it notes will stay in front. So just like in other platforms where you group things together, this doesn't have a grouping quality, but it has a way for you to put it to the where you want it to be seen. So if you, and I will do that also on the other ones so that everybody's Post-it notes are showing. Okay, and so what I will do, I'll go back through and read these and take your suggestions for the next time that I do this particular presentation. And if there's things that you would like followed up on, you can contact me at my email address and I will help you out if you don't have any more questions in the chat box. Although you can also unmute and just ask the question if you'd like as well. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Cassie. I really thank you today for your engagement and bearing with the little task that I've given you to participate today. But look how much I know. I've given whole presentations before, and the videos have been off and the mics have been off. And at the end, I wasn't even sure people were still behind them or not. So this makes people to engage, whether their video's on or not. You know that they're still out there and breathing, and it's all good. So thank you very much for today.
Thank you, Amy. It does look like we have a few questions, and it's even posted on your board about, is there a way to keep the shapes in place or to keep people from moving other people's Post-its?
Not that I'm aware of. You know, that's part of the whole whiteboard process, is that everybody can move everything, and that's the collaborative part of it, so that if I wanted to turn somebody else's Post-it note, I can. You know, if I wanted to call attention to it or make it bigger so that I can see it when I present. But not that I'm aware of. It's just something that, you know, when you work with people over time, especially if it's a staff or students, and you get used to that, you tell them, you know, if you've done something, just Control Z and put it back. And that's pretty much the quick, easy way to fix something.
And realistically, especially with Post-its, that can happen in a real life setting anyways.
Sure.
So yes, self-governing is probably the best bet there.
I mean, you can also, like, if you have a situation where you have people, say you're doing something with a staff and you want to have them group their ideas together, that allows everybody to be able to move everybody else's Post-it note into a group. You can even stack them on top of each other. So if you're looking for duplicate ideas, you could just stack them up too. So all kinds of ways of manipulations.
Yeah. There's also some questions about knowing which students are doing what on the Jamboard without them having to self-identify. And Amy, every time you move a post-it, I can see what you're doing because you're logged into your Google account. And I'm wondering if that's not a way to monitor students also, because when you're logged into your Google account, it would have that person's name associated with it. So that might be a strategy if you're.
Yeah, I think if you have a network where, like right here, when I look up at the top of mine, everybody's anonymous alligator, buffalo. But if you're working in the same network, you're right. When you log on, it becomes that person. So you'll be able to see, like, there's a little, as the person's working, you can be able to see their little tab come up if they're in the same network. Just like in a Google Doc, you know, people's color changes and you can see them where they are.
Looks like people are still playing, but the questions have slowed down. There's one message that says, after I added my star, a message appeared that said I could not add a revision. Do you know of anything that would allow for not revising?
I've not seen that before, so that's something new to me. So like I said, I've been using this for just the past 3 months or so, and I haven't had that come up. So, and I've used it in probably about 6 presentations now as professional developments in different ways, and I haven't had that. So maybe it was just somebody trying to revise while you were revising something where you were trying to do the same thing at the same time. That would be the one thing that I could think of if I was trying to change words or move something that someone else was moving.
You should flip to the looking forward to board. We have some very good doodlers on this call right now. Got some good smiley face action.
I love it when you like to play with the tool. That's awesome.
Yes, yes.
All right. Well,
yeah, thanks for the feedback there, Terry. I think we can get with you maybe afterwards to talk a little bit more. They mentioned that there was a red bar that appeared over the section where you can move the slides back and forth. So, okay. Well, Amy, yes, thank you so much for the Jamboard tutorial. I know in this room.
Is this what she's talking about up here? Is that, see my pictures above the Jamboard that I'm on? I can see that 3 people are above this Jamboard, and then a lot of people are on 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 are on the last Jamboard. So I could see where people are up here doing that way. And I see an image. I have to go look at the image. What day is it? All of us right now. Love it.
They're demonstrating what the class clown would do, right?
That's right. They're gonna put pictures in there.
Well, thank you for the energy.
I wonder if I can see. I wish I could see like who was the author of this. I can see why people would want that. I've worked with adults, so I don't know. There's not been any.
Well, now there has been.
Yeah, I mean, there's not been any.
You know, so oftentimes with this technology, especially technology that's like been newly published and newly picked up, I've noticed this with Microsoft products too. The online boards where you can request features to various technologies have been super responsive by the people who are publishing them. So I'm sure there's a Google forum board out there for Jamboards where we can request features. And so perhaps requesting being able to see who authored a particular post in Jamboard is something that we could collectively ask for together. So that's a good suggestion.
It is.
Okay. So I want to move just real quick to share with you a little bit of another type of virtual activity board type technology that we can use together. So much in this remote setting, we've been talking about synchronous versus asynchronous instruction. And so Jamboard is a great tool to be able to do some synchronous instruction where we're all kind of moving at things in the same pace, but it also does allow for you to assign these type of things for students who maybe are working at their own pace. So we're going to talk a little bit about Padlet, and our team at the department has started to draft for you, if you're interested in it, some activities that might relate to the Ohio Means Jobs Readiness Seal. So I'm going to post in the chat one more time the links to all of our boards here, and we're going to switch gears to very quickly take a look at another technology called Padlet. And we've designed this activity board to be a little more self-paced for students, if that's something that might be helpful to you all as you're really trying to bake in that career readiness message into all that you're doing in a remote setting or a blended setting. Or this is even a great tool if you're in person, but you don't necessarily get to see every student every day. So this particular online tool is called Padlet. It is free. You just sign up for a free account and you get at least a minimum of 3 Padlets. I believe if you sign up as an educator, you get even more than that. So take a look at it, see if you like it. Again, most of this technology that we're introducing you to is really just whatever your personal preference is. So yep, again, free, and you're able to have at least 3 free Padlets. What we've started to design for you as a template here, and if you're interested in us helping to build out more, we're happy to do that, are activities that relate to each of the 15 Ohio Means Jobs Readiness skills. And I believe a couple of my teammates are on the call too, so if you want to unmute and add to anything, by all means, please do. So really, this activity board, you can design to have all kinds of different formats. So there's kind of like a social media wall type format. There's just a blank canvas type format, which is more similar to a virtual whiteboard. There's streams, so you can add posts in a stream. And then today what we used is a grid. There's also this back channel, a map, and a timeline. So there's lots of things to play with here, but they're all various versions of this like online canvas. And this grid allows for you to put posts in columns so that students can kind of see in a vertical manner what progress they're supposed to make in each activity. So here we just kind of introduced the Ohio Means Jobs Readiness here and tried to make it very clear that this is where someone would start if they're using this activity board on their own. So this kind of walks them through the Ohio Means Jobs Readiness Seal. And for each of these posts, there are specific instructions for what the student is supposed to do with each post, to kind of let the teacher know, or in this case, us know if they've seen the post and what they've done with it. So then it really just kind of instructs the student or the person using this board to move through each of these columns. And the way that we've designed these columns is each skill has 3 activities that are meant to build on each other. So the first one is all about defining the particular professional skill. So in this case, defining professionalism, defining work ethic, and defining reliability. So we've linked for you different videos that are free access for folks to watch. And basically that first defining activity is all about watching a particular skill and reflecting on it. And then it's all about practice. So the student would either respond to a prompt, create a project, or this particular one links to an additional online course that is related to that professional skill. So it's defining and then practicing and then finally performing. So each of these then has a performing activity where the student would either work with their mentor to gauge how well they are doing at that particular skill. They would respond to a prompt or create some type of a project. And so the great thing about this type of activity board here is, again, students can kind of work at their own pace. Each of these posts have a suggested way that you could ask for verification that the student has performed the activity. And then this Padlet has a feature where you can copy this board into your own account. And then you can change these up to be whatever you would like. So it's really easy to do that. If you have a Padlet account, you just visit this link here, click Remake, And then it will, in my case, my limit is reached, but in your case, if you don't have 3 Padlets, then it will let you just copy this particular board right to your own account so that you could use it with your individual students as well. So hopefully this is an example for you of how to boost student engagement by blending technology type of activities with real life type of activities in more of an asynchronous way for people to be able to pace themselves as they go through the Ohio Means Jobs Readiness skills. And this really is our employability skill platform here, things that we know all students need to be able to practice and perform throughout their high school careers. So hopefully Padlet is also helpful for you as well. So with that, we'd like to open it up to any questions that you have. Again, we really wanted to build off of our last session around kind of those fundamental principles of engaging students in remote learning and show you some ways to actually put that into action. If you did not get a chance to view our session last time, it is posted on our Career Connections webpage, which that link is in the chat. And I'm happy to post it again if that's helpful. So you can kind of use this as a 2-part series to help boost student engagement and career readiness, even if they're in a remote setting at this time. We did include a link to a survey here off to the chat. If you could give us some feedback on if you're liking these sessions or what type of topics that you'd like to see in the future. The goal is that we're going to host these at least once a month. And so we want to make sure that we're being responsive to your needs as career readiness leaders. If you've got some friends in other districts that haven't joined us, we'd love to have them join us. So please feel free to put on their calendar. And again, all of these sessions are recorded so that if this time doesn't work out for anyone, then maybe they can watch it at a later date. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and see if you have any questions. So please feel free to unmute and ask any questions that you might have.
The recorded sessions are found on the Career Connections page under Events and Resources. If you scroll all the way to the bottom of that page, there's a lot of different things at the top right now, but if you go down to the bottom, there's all the pre-recorded meetings that we've had, and also any upcoming ones. As we have new ones, the link will be found right there as well. I don't know, Cassie, if you have that link available or not. Let me see if I do.
Yeah, I posted it. Yeah, here we go. I posted it earlier today. So here it is. I'll post it in the chat again. That's the unfortunate thing about Teams is the chat, the content gets sucked up when you're chatting a lot, which is good. Okay, we actually ended like right on time this month, which is a success. But we do, again, want to make sure that we're being super responsive to your needs and giving you a platform to connect with each other in these very uncertain times. So thank you for all you're doing out in the field. We know that it's, you got students in person, students hybrid, students remote. So keeping track of all that is very difficult. And we truly appreciate you continuing to carry that torch of career readiness even in these uncertain times. So with that, on behalf of the Department of Education, thank you. Amy, did you have any closing remarks you'd like to add?
No, one of the things I think we're going to work on at the ESC here in Northeast Ohio is creating a scenario board so that we can create a variety of different scenarios. So we can make that available to anyone after we get it completed. So I know that other people wanted to add different kinds of scenarios in there. And if each person could contribute one, we'd have kind of a bank with different kinds of scenarios that could be utilized. And it could be used with Jamboard or just a role play or just for discussion topics. So a variety of ways it could be used.
Awesome. Okay, well, it seems like there's a lot of interest in having all 15 professional skills available on that particular Padlet. So I know our Department of Education team will continue to build those out with the help of Amy Harker. If you've got a particular video that you know is like really rocking it and helping kids understand that particular skill that you're willing to share with us so that we can use it on that Padlet, we'd be happy to take your recommendations as well. Okay. Well, thanks everyone. We hope you have a great rest of your afternoon. We'll see you next month. Bye.
Glad you could join us. Cassie? Cassie, are you still there? Save the chat.